I'd like to open it up now to all of the questions, whether that is for the Common Experiment 1 or 2, if you guys have questions for the team.
Sarah, while folks are thinking of questions, it occurs to me on Common Experiment 2 that we didn't talk about collecting rye and corn data, but obviously we will be collecting rye biomass data, and then we'll be collecting, I would say, usual agronomic corn data, so stand counts and monitoring when we get to tasseling and silking, yield data, looking at the number of barren plants in the field, things like that. So if anyone was wondering if we're collecting information on the cover crop or the cash crop, yes, we are. Sorry, that was my mistake. I forgot to ask the postdocs and myself too, that we should have included that.
I guess I had a question on the root photos and how the team planned to harvest roots during later stages of growth. Rye can put down some pretty deep roots, and I'm just wondering how you guys are handling that.
That's a great question. So we are only looking at the roots of corn, and when the corn is at that V3 growth stage. So based on the work that we've done here in Iowa, that V3 growth stage is a pretty good growth stage to go in. We can still manage to dig up the whole seedling root system. Once we get to V5, V6, we lose a lot of the seedling root system. So V3, go in and assess the root rot on the corn plants only. It's a great question. So we won't be looking at the rye roots at all.
Okay, that answers it. I was hoping for some great ideas there, but that seems like a practical solution.
Sorry, Mike.
And I might mention that there's a little crossover here with some of this corn protocol for the diseases that will be in the on-farm as well. That's not covered here. It won't be as intensive, but Allison's done an amazing job of conceptualizing a light and tight for the on-farm folks as well.
Yeah, and I think so. That brings up a good point, Chris. Rochelle talked about numbering the seedlings and how we wanted to rate root rot to the height of the seedlings, and that kind of comes into that whole light and tight protocol that we've developed for the on-farm network. That based on our experience, we see the more root rot, the shorter the seedling. The seedling tends to be delayed in growth stage and just shorter. And so we're thinking, in terms of light and tight, you don't want to be digging up seedlings if there's no seedling disease going on, but you could go through and do a stand count and notice if some of those plants seem to be delayed, then that would be a good indication to go in and now dig up seedlings to look for root rot. So that's kind of the background behind, or the justification for Rochelle wanting those seedlings numbered.
Well, I enjoyed seeing a wide range of protocols. It's sort of my great love in this network, honestly. I was wondering, this is a quick question for the insect team. Have you envisioned how you might develop a light and tight protocol that you might roll out on farm after you try out your first year in the Common Experiment?
Yeah, so I've been trying to conceptualize this a lot. To be clear, this is only my 3rd month on the job, so I'm still getting my full head around everything. The slug population tracking is actually a pretty straightforward protocol that I think could be employed pretty well and easily in the on-farm, because it really is just a matter of like laying out the shingle traps after planting and then checking them at a regular interval. So I think that like that one in itself is pretty straightforward. But to be honest, I really haven't thought much of the other 2 experiments in that way. But the slug one, which is again a pretty regional issue, at least seems pretty easily transferable into like here's a kit that you need, and it's easily accessible for farmers to, in terms of it's not necessarily cost prohibitive. You don't need any significant materials besides a roll of roofing shingles and like, yeah. But the other 2 are a little bit more difficult. It's also, I think you tend to get, right, similar to disease, you tend to get like these pockets of insect outbreak, which could be problematic. But if anyone else has thought about this sort of thing, they're welcome to join in.
Yeah, no, the slugs is very interesting. We get a lot of conflicting feedback whether or not slugs are a problem in different areas. So I think that that would be very interesting to roll out across such a large area of the US. So thank you.
Yeah, the slugs is an interesting question to me. There's
The
a
only
lot.
challenge there, Sarah, is that sorry. So a challenge with the slug piece is that that sampling needs to be done early in the morning. And my sense of the on-farm work is that there's not always a predictable time of day that folks can get there. So it's not likely that they'll be there before 8 or 9 o'clock. So if people are doing like 3 farms in a day, that's not a possibility. For the predation assay, that requires more than 1 visit in 1 day. And my sense again is that people visit the farm, they do what they need to do, and then they move on and they're not coming back. So the predation assay requires a couple visits, or at least 1 long extended visit. So if you put the sentinel prey item out in the morning, you need to come back in the evening to see if it's killed, or vice versa. And my sense is that for the protocol to be useful, it needs to be of a shorter duration. And we don't have any data to suggest that the shorter duration provides good information. We've only ever done it for a long period of time because we're, campus is 15 minutes from our research farm. And what's the last one? Oh, and the last one is just the damage assessment. And we have included that in the on-farm protocol.
Yeah,
That's a great point. I thank you, John. It's really helpful to kind of get that linkage between timing and what is feasible. And so I probably would be useful to kind of revisit with a smaller group, like particularly like trying to line up maybe a couple of samplings with the litter bags or something, if it is possible. It sounds like it might not be possible because of the time restriction, right? Of just having to get there early in the morning. That might be a deal breaker in itself. And so I'm just, in the sake of being optimistic, maybe we should just revisit and just see frequency of sampling of what's going on, when people are going to be there, and just revisit that, with you and your team.
Yeah. Oh, and we got a good question. Good.
Yeah, happy to have that conversation.
Rob asking questions about whether time-lapse photography can be used. That's a great question, Rob. And that's, I think that suggests like the orientation that we try to use with this, because I think as the insect team has highlighted, there are some protocols that are just very hard to figure out how you would make them light and tight to fit into the on-farm. And we have a history of things that failed. We tried to take a nitrogen scavenging protocol light and tight enough to do it at mass. And after a couple of years of doing it, we said, you know what? It's not doable. It's not doable. We just debate, so these are hard things. And every research question we might want to ask on this huge on-farm network isn't always askable. So those are the reality. But I like that suggestion, Rob. I think that's worth us talking about and thinking about there. So.
Yeah, you know, just as a fun fact, I recently did throw away quite a few videotapes of Chris trying to videotape insects overnight. So something that has been attempted, but we now have much more high-tech solutions we can try again.
That was a dark moment. Thanks for bringing that up, Sarah. Great. Any other questions or feedback for the excellent CE1 and 2 speakers? All right.
Guess I'll just comment on the idea about game cameras. We have a little experience with that, and certainly entomologists have been trying this for a while. But in my experience, the people that have done this the best use like kind of security cameras, and which have provided good enough resolution, but they need like these clunky hard drives that need to be weatherproof and sit with them in order to get enough kind of storage space for like 24 hours of video, because a lot of insects are too small to trigger game cameras. I mean, they're not big and they're not moving fast a lot of the time, so they don't really trigger a game camera the same way, you know, a turkey or a deer would. So it's just like these little challenges that you might not think of. And to address Rob's idea specifically, so we're trying to capture, we have good data that shows that the number of slugs beneath the shingles corresponds well to stand establishment and success of the subsequent crop, or the cash crop, I should say. But just having like the camera pointed at the ground to see if a slug walks by, or pointed at a particular plant to see if a slug walks by, is unlikely to be fruitful given the size of the field. And on that particular point, how small it is. So like these logistical challenges need to be considered. I welcome any other ideas, or heck, any ideas, because we haven't had much success on this front. So with all these people's eyes and brains, we might be able to come up with something. But kind of the simpler low-hanging fruits have been tried without success.
Yeah, the
It
camera
seems like a
method.
really fun, worthwhile. I'm sorry, someone else is going.
Oh, sorry. The camera methods are more something that I'm toying around with. I am bugging John to get me a camera so I can mess around with some greenhouse assays to see if we can actually do something camera-based. Though I'm not really sure how widely that could be expanded at the end of the day.
You know, not suggesting that by any means, you know, John, that we are going to come up with some great solution, but this is like this is cut in that the cloth or the flavor, if you have of like how we want to operate, right? Is like domain experts like you who really know all the issues and the logistical challenges coming before some of the engineering team and just be like, this is our problem. You know, what are you guys thinking, and giving them a little bit of a chance around the design and creativity side to think through that process. So it always works so much better when an expert like you is like, well, we thought about this and this is why these things don't work. Can you do that? And so this seems like a real fun exercise maybe, and we'll reach back out to you. I already see Paula just kind of like twiddling her fingers with excitement of ideas. So anyway, cool. Thanks, John.
I was thinking to create like a stress cam, modify the stress cam to create a solution for the CE1.
Well, that'd be fun to think about, Paula. So just a little, yeah. I mean, that's part of the magic of the group here, is that the huge range of expertise. So I think it'd be worth talking about. I think that point John made is the hardest part to overcome, is that, you know, having enough cameras out there to actually capture the one slug wandering by is tough. So it's a pretty big challenge. But we do have, Paula's an expert on time lapse, inexpensive, cheap time lapse cameras, and she builds her own, and we've got them. You know, we'll have 10 states receiving stress cams this year. So we are producing these things at scale. So anyway. And also an expert too for the whole, this is really for everybody as we think about other metrics. And I have highlighted, this is a great circle back to that point, is that we hope and believe there are beta tests to be coming in 2022 we don't yet know about, and they could be insect related, but they could be other things related. We like to have this type of discussion that we're having right here, get other scientists from other disciplines in here thinking about, you know, oh, what about this? What about that? I need this. Are there any technological folks that can help solve this problem? These are the most fruitful discussions we can have, I think.